I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. In this season, we're taking a look at Groundhog Day after day after day after day. I'm your host, Bubba Wheat from Flight Sites and Movie Nights, and in this episode, we're discussing Phil's 9th Groundhog Day that starts at 47 minutes and 27 seconds, with Phil ordering sweet vermouth, rocks with a twist, which just so happens to be Rita's favorite drink, and ends at 49 minutes and 27 seconds, with Phil laughing at Rita's study of 19th century French poetry. Today, my guest is Sean, host of Next Scene Podcast. Good to have you back.
Didn't you just ask me that? No,
I don't know. I'll go ask the kitchen.
Thank you very much for having me back. I'm glad to be here. I've got my sweet vermouth with a twist. I'm watching the sun in the sky and the shadows, the way it hits the buildings in the afternoon, and I'm saying a prayer to world peace. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Jump right in.
I actually feel like right here is where Rita starts to turn. I think just the look on her face whenever Phil is talking about saying a prayer for world peace, where yesterday she was just totally baiting him with the toast question, and then he got it wrong, and she's just like, okay, yeah, he got it. In her head, I feel like she was just thinking, yeah, he got it wrong, but this one, he got it right, and he took it just a step further than she would have, and that gives her pause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that someone orders the same drink that you do at a bar, that happens. That's not that crazy. But when someone has the same toast you always like to make, or the same thing, that they drink to, that's maybe, a little bit too coincidence, and particularly coming from Phil. We've talked about how she knew Phil, briefly, but she knew him outside of the loop and outside of Punxsutawney, and this doesn't seem, for what she knows, it seems out of character. So maybe there's a little bit more to this Phil character than she thought. I like this particular segment, and one of the things I love about this movie and makes the movie so rewatchable to me is trying to guess where Phil is. And we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about how many days, or how long does he spend in Punxsutawney, or how long are we in it at a particular point in the film. I always like trying to guess when Phil's doing something. Is it the first time he's doing it? Is it the second time? Is it the 10th time, the 100th time? Like, how many times has he been through a particular thing as we're seeing him build up this script kind of one line at a time? He's ordering the drink, he's making the toast, the Rome and the sun hitting the buildings and all that stuff. And what we see is, so Phil's a jerk. We know that. That he's also smart and he can figure things out. And if he does things 2, 3, 4 times, he can kind of get it right. But then we also see he can over prepare, over rehearse. And this is like this section, this like about 2 minutes, this loop, we kind of get to see all of that. We see he orders the drink. He's got that right. I think he starts to go too far. Like, so the drink, oh, it's the same drink. And what do you drink to? Oh, that's the same thing I drink to. Then he does like the little amen after the prayer. And I think that's where we start getting into, he's overdoing it. He's overthinking it. He's kind of he starts rushing it, and you'll see it more later on when he starts getting slapped, where it's like he's over prepared and then he starts rushing through the steps to get to, okay, all right, I know I got to do A, B, C. Let me get to D, because that's the thing I don't know what's going to happen. And then it's A, B, C, D. Okay, E. And he starts rushing through those other things, and he starts losing it. He starts, I don't know if he gets overexcited to get to the new stuff. Maybe he starts getting bored with the parts that he's done before. But yeah, so again, going back to, I just like to try to figure out how many times he's done things, and when does he get to the point that he figured out something that's worked, but he does it too many times and then it stops working. And I think we're starting to see him. I think he's done this more than, was this the third time we've seen him come in and say, "Can I buy you a drink?" I think he's done it more than 3 times.
Yeah, I'm somebody that can be spreadsheet obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have, a full-on spreadsheet where I'm keeping track of 8 or 9 milestones in the movie. I'm keeping track of how many times they show up. I'm asking, every guest how long they think Phil's been in the entire loop. I'm keeping track of all that. And I'm keeping track of how long I personally think that Phil has been in this Groundhog Day to this point in the movie. And coming up with my own estimation, my guess was that he had spent about 150 days going on dates and planning the armored car robbery. And I think the very next day is the one where he decides to date Rita. And I think the reason for that is because of the, does Phil feel lucky? Which I don't think that he spent a lot of different times dressed up as Bronco to see Heidi too. I feel like that was a one and done kind of thing where he was at the point in the dates where he's just doing something different to try and keep it interesting for him, but he's gotten bored of it, so that's why he's finally switching to Rita. And then I think this is about the 10th time.
Yeah, I was gonna say about a dozen times. We've seen 3, but I would guess 10 or 12 times that he's been through. And this isn't, in terms of complexity and planning, this isn't the bank heist or some of the other things. This isn't learning how to make an ice sculpture with a chainsaw. This is just making a toast to, drinking to world peace.
Yeah. For one little background detail that I noticed this time is I feel like there's way too many chocolate groundhogs in that sweet shop, and they all look disturbing.
Well, yeah, and then what did they do with them? Because at this point, so it's dark, right? When they walk out? Or maybe we do we see? No.
No, it's hard to see what time it is, but, well, I guess we at least get to the restaurant here, and we know that he started at the Tip Top Cafe at 11:30, and then I think shortly after he went to the hotel bar, so that could still be, early afternoon, and then mid-afternoon for the sweet shop, and then going into later in the evening, or like early evening for the restaurant.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, for some reason I presumed it was a little bit later, but now that I'm looking at it, we actually don't see them outside. They're inside the bar, and we don't see windows. The bar is actually in the basement of the hotel. So they're their basement bar, and then they're inside the fudge or the sweet shop, and then inside the restaurant. So yeah, I got the feeling it was later in the day, but now I'm not sure why I feel that. But I'm kind of like it's Groundhog Day, and so the groundhog is going to be a big seller. What do they do with all the chocolate groundhogs tomorrow?
Well, that's whenever you get the 50% or the 75% off chocolates.
I just know, I go to the market, the day after Valentine's Day, and they're all the pink cupcakes that are half off and like that. So
yeah, the two best holidays for candyholics is the day after Valentine's and the day after Halloween.
Halloween, yeah. So there's a lot of food. This is like a day with me. If you ever visit me, all our activities are going to be planned around food. I'm going to have breakfast, and then we'll hit the bar, we'll drink a little bit, we'll hit the sweet shop, and then it's, over chocolate groundhogs, we'll talk about, okay, what are we doing for dinner? Going back to me talking about my small talk and my lack of socialization skills. So I'm like, you know what? If we're eating, I don't have to worry about what we're talking about or what we're doing.
There is one thing that's mentioned here for the first time that I think it's a good time to really dig into. And I was actually a little bit surprised because it didn't come up in Groundhog Minute except just a couple times towards the end. Because here Rita talks about deja vu.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important in the context of the time loop, because going back to a lot of other time loop stories, especially sci-fi stories, I think it's interesting because in a lot of the sci-fi ones, like the Star Trek ones, there isn't a Phil character there's the one person that retains all his memories.
Right.
They're usually ensemble casts, and so they're all typically trapped in a time loop with none of them retaining their memories of what's come before. And then slowly they start getting the feeling that they're trapped in a time loop, and then they start working it out the longer that they're in there, and they start retaining more memories of the previous iterations the longer that they're stuck there. And I feel like that there is maybe not, physical memories, but I feel like there is an energy that Phil puts out into the town. And that's something that affects how people interact with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly in certain respects, this is sort of a simple telling of this kind of tale, and there's some maybe more sophisticated or more complicated kind of change-ups that happen in some other things where, like in Palm Springs or Russian Doll was a series that kind of involved, a recent series that involved time loops where either there's multiple people in the loops, or like you said, where there's no one in the loop or no one that knows about the loop, and so they all everyone figures it out together, or in Happy Death Day where there's an effect where there's a physical after effect where the person isn't reset 100%, and if they died the previous day they come back but they're a little bit weaker or they're somehow affected. We didn't talk about it too much, but I always think there's got to be something, because there's memory is physical. So if the obvious physical stuff, if Phil gets hit by a train or he jumps off the roof of a building, if he physically kills himself, that gets reset. Or I presume if he breaks a bone, that would get reset in the next loop. But the mind, the brain is a physical organ. So there must be some physical manifestation of memories and things we learn, and Phil is able to learn and remember things. So there is some aspect of it, of it being physical. And so maybe that's something that, Rita and other people can pick up on, even if they're not recognizing it to the extent that Phil does. So maybe they are feeling, maybe that's what deja vu is.
Well, I think that,
yeah.
I think that the whole, the brain being physical is the disconnect, is where you have to disconnect the science from the writing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that one is taking it just a little step too far, because I think that's the one gimme that I'll give to the writer that has to happen for this story to exist at all. To where in the writer's mind, the mind is metaphysical and not talking about the physical brain and the neuron connections. It's more the metaphysical spirit.
Yeah. So I don't know if I guess theoretically something there could be a time loop that the space-time continuum could be warped in a way that you kind of flip around back to where you were previously in time, not just in space. But could you do that and still retain some memory? Wouldn't you be completely reset and you'd have no recollection and no way to know what happened before? And I also wonder, and you can get into this, deeper when you get later in the film, but when people talk about muscle memory, playing the piano to play quickly, it can't be, you have to build up something that's sort of outside of the conscious brain to play an instrument quickly and to hit the notes precisely. You can't be thinking exactly of everything that needs to be done. That's the whole point of practice, that you kind of do it without thinking. So where is that?
Yeah, piano is not necessarily just something that you learn, that you can just learn by memory. It's something that you have to build dexterity in your fingers.
Right. Well, yeah. So there's and like strength, it's like exercising. You have to have a certain strength in your fingers. I mean, if you hit a piano key once, you may think, well, there's not much resistance to that. Like I can hit a key, but if you're playing a song that's very quick, you've got to hit a lot of keys and you've got to be able to hit them quickly. Like your fingers will get tired. So can Phil build strength? Can he build up muscle? If he spent all these loops instead of studying French and piano and everything, if he was hitting the gym every day, would he get stronger? Could he build muscle over time, or does that get reset?
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing if he was able to physically change, and then you'd have the comedy reactions of Larry and Rita, where whenever he gets into his depressed state and he gains 100 pounds overnight.
Yeah.
Or if he starts getting into a workout kick and then he builds 100 pounds of muscle overnight, going in the opposite direction. It's like, Phil, you look different.
He's just this. I mean, not scrawny, but he's just kind of a medium build
he's got a
sort
dad
of guy
bod.
in the van driving out to Punxsutawney, and then he shows up the morning of February 2nd, and like he's just bulging muscles that are ripping his sport coat is ripping, like the Hulk. I don't know how what kind of reaction Larry would have to that. These are the things we got to think about, because if we won't, who will?
Yeah, and then I think this day also has another good example of facial acting with Andy McDowell. Right at the end, whenever Phil laughs at Rita's study of French poetry, and if you watch her face during that scene, she's having a good time, and then as soon as he starts laughing, like over the course of like 2 or 3 seconds, her smile like slowly fades away from her face, and then she just starts like looking down at her salad and just kind of poking at her salad, even though Phil's like trying to recover it.
Yeah, you see it in her eyes, her mouth, or certainly her smile drops, her head drops into her, looking down into her salad, so her body language changes because he's kind of turned into a little bit of a bully here, kind of just laughing, and that's. I mean, sometimes like we know Phil's a jerk, but I think even for Phil to just, someone says, "Oh, this is what I studied," and to say, "Well, that was a waste of time." Like is he even trying? I mean, even if he can say like, again, even for a jerk, and even if like, okay, this is the first time, the first cycle through, the first time he's managed to carry her interest, that he's managed to get Rita to have dinner with him.
And I feel like this isn't a huge leap based on what he already does know about Rita. Mm-hmm. Because, she seems, especially from his point of view, she seems like she's a more cultured person. That's why he uses the roam in the afternoon line, mm-hmm. because that makes him seem more cultured to appeal to what he thinks is a cultured woman. And then that's the fact that she studied French poetry. That's like the stereotypical epitome of cultured. Mm-hmm. And that to throw him off that much, it is a little surprising.
Yeah, it's a little jarring that he goes that far. You don't expect Rita's going to say, "Oh, I studied chemical engineering or something." Yeah, just maybe sociology or maybe like he says broadcasting or journalism or acting or something like that. I mean, that does seem in terms of if you want to pick something to study that's going to be, very arts oriented, very academic, and something that doesn't seem to have much practical application in the career world. 19th century, like not just French poetry, but very specifically 19th century French poetry is a particular choice. But Yeah, the reaction that he has certainly seems over the top. Maybe that's on purpose in terms of, the filmmaker to go that far in case we're getting seduced along with Rita, in case we're beginning to think and kind of buy it like, oh, maybe Phil is getting better. Maybe Phil is getting more sensitive. Maybe Phil is starting to honestly learn about Rita and get in touch with her, that this kind of just goes so far in the opposite direction to remind us that no, this guy's a jerk and like an extreme jerk. And that whenever he says the right thing, whenever he does the right thing, it's only because of the time loop. It's only because of the practice and the rehearsal, and that he's had multiple do-overs and multiple tries to get it right. That's the only way he can get anything right at this point, because when he's just off the cuff and he's just unprepared, he ends up laughing in her face and obviously making her feel really bad.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time for me to point out one in terms of the structure of this movie and in the time loop. There's a lot of talk about Phil has forever to fall in love with Rita, but Rita only has one day to fall in love with Phil.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the real purpose of especially this date sequence is to make the audience fall in love with Rita.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because this is all about getting to know Rita and getting to know the things that Rita likes and just spending time with Rita. So I think this whole section really is about getting the audience to fall in love with Rita and getting the audience on Rita's side.
Yeah, because we have to be interested in that. So yeah, we wanna, or the film wants us to have some investment in Phil and to want him to be redeemed and come around. But it also there's a love story happening here, and we have to be interested in them getting together. So we have to like Rita. Part of the reason we shortcut some of these things, and we've talked about, we get the feeling that there's other loops, that they're going through these paces more times than we see them, because it's not necessarily, at this point we know kind of Phil's deal and what he's doing. We don't need to see Phil make that toast to world peace a half dozen times, but we want to see, okay, this is what Rita drinks to, and this is kind of her chit chat and what she talks about and what she studied in college. Yeah, getting to know Rita. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it. Mostly watching the movie, and Phil's our main character, and kind of thinking about Phil. So interesting. I hadn't kind of thought about this section of the film from that perspective. I like that. Yeah. Let's get to know something about Rita.
Yeah.
What makes Rita tick?
All right. Well, I think we're going to get to know a little bit more about Rita tomorrow. So I hope you'll join me at least one more day. One more Groundhog Day.
I'd love to. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and remind everybody else where they can find you online before we head out today?
Okay. Well, I've got another little podcast that I produce. It's actually not related to, not about a movie, but it is related to acting and, dancing and all kinds of physical performing arts. It's actually a podcast about mime, and that is 5 Minutes of Mime, FIVE. It's spelled out 5minutesofmime.com is the website. And it's 5 minutes. Each episode is only 5 minutes. And we talk about mime and how mime plays into acting and dancing and all kinds of other performances. So, you don't have to be a mime expert or a mimist to get into it, because we talk about how, all kinds of different physical performing and performance arts and the intersection of those. So you can check that out. And that's at 5minutesofmime.com.
All right. That's great. Thanks again for being here today. And as always, I am Bubba Wheat from FlightsTightsAndMovieNights.com. And this podcast is It's Time to Rewind, and you can find it on Anchor.fm and anywhere else you can subscribe to podcasts. And I think today I'd like to end our episode with a moment of silence and some thoughts on world peace. Amen.
To world peace. Amen.
I'm a god. Well, what if there is no tomorrow? I'm a god. There wasn't one today.
I like to say a prayer and drink to world peace.
To world peace.
World peace.